I'm also responsible for the digital development team in Brent and for information governance. So my career has just spanned in Brent. Like I started in Brent 22 years ago as a assistant customer service officer. I think I was mainly recruited to do translation kind of services in customer care. Became a team leader, became a team manager. And then I had that itch. I wanted to learn something new or do something else. You know, I was in the contact center for quite some time. I then decided to work on a project as a project support officer. Loved it, did it for a year, and then got onto another project as a business analyst, then became a service improvement manager. Along the way, somewhere 3-4 years ago, I became the digital transformation lead for Brent. And here I am right now being the head of digital transformation. A lot of people have asked me, looking through my journey, you've done a range of things. Like, how did you know? How did you kind of maneuver and get into all of these different roles? Genuinely, the only thing that stands out for me was I was nosy. I think there's a better word for it these days. They call it professional curiosity. But I was just point blank nosy. I wanted to know everything. I would ask everybody questions. If something didn't seem right, I would be like, but why? Why are we not doing something about it? So this why thing was always there with me. And I know how annoying it can be because I have 2 kids. And I just think that nosiness, that journey, having to learn different stuff, and also the kind of realization that you have during this journey, I've always believed you have to be technically very sound. You have to know technology if you're going to do any work around technology. And actually, I'm completely non-technical. What I'm good at is looking at technology beyond technology. Technology is an enabler. So for me, it was just about all of that customer experience. How do you make a difference? What kind of things do you do differently to get the best outcome? That has been my focus. So I think when I speak to Mel and Lauren a lot, why I'm interested in this topic is because I want people to know that you don't need to be technical in everything. You don't need to be an expert in everything. And there's something unique about everyone that they can bring to the table. It's up to us how we jointly figure out how we get the best out of everybody's strengths. So for me, I also chair the women's network in Brent. And for me, it is about sharing this story so people realize that, yes, we can do it, kind of a thing, and just to kind of encourage and inspire and be more creative on how you can get more people coming into technology. Like I used to always believe, and I'm sharing this as a real story. In my earlier career days, if I had conversations with IT and if somebody said, oh, there's a job going in IT, I would say, but I don't drink, because there was this thing that you have to go down to the pub and you have to connect with people, because that's where most of the blokes in IT would go in Brent on a Friday evening. And I'm like, okay, I don't socialize like that, so maybe it's not for me. What a myth. So for me, it's about sharing my story just to break that myth and break the bias. So that's me, Lauren.
Thank you, Rehana. That was lovely as always. Amanda, would you mind going next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Staincliffe, and I'm the Assistant Director of Operations at Homes England. Homes England is a public sector organisation with the arm's length body for DLUC, which is the Department of Levelling Up and Housing and Communities, which is an awfully long long title for a department. We're responsible for addressing the housing needs for England, and we're also just got the remit of regeneration as well, with the white paper for the Levelling Up agenda that's been in the news recently. I've worked in this organisation for an awfully long time, put it that way, so long that I can't even remember. It's been predecessor organisations from English Partnerships to Homes and Communities Agency, and now Homes England. And I started off my career as putting the first help desk in. That's how long ago. That sort of might give it away as to how long I've been here. We didn't have a help desk. People were writing things down on post-it notes and putting them into an Excel spreadsheet, or it probably wasn't even Excel at the time. And also training. So I started off my career very much in the people side. I like to think of technology, bringing people up to speed with how the new technology was going to be used within the organisation. We actually put the first networks into the organisation. We didn't have networks. Not everybody had a computer on their desk. Can't imagine a time like that now. I actually had to share a computer with a colleague of mine. And we used to travel the length and breadth of the country training people on Windows 3.1, which gives my age away somewhat, and data protection. And over the years, I think probably the key there is around taking opportunity. So where an opportunity arose, I sort of just went for it. I didn't think, oh, I don't think I can do that. I thought, well, let's learn about that and let's try it. And I think that's been a bit of a theme when I look back. So I'm now responsible for the operations team, and that looks after platform and infrastructure, cyber security, and digital support as well. I've never let that sort of less technical background, if you like, hold me back. And one of the things I suppose that's really important to me, I'm the co-chair of our employee network, the Women in Digital Network here at Homes England, is after 30 years of working in technology, I'm still too often either the only woman in the room or one of the very few women in the room. So I know that's not going to change unless we actually do something about it, and we need to take some positive action. And that's me.
Thanks, Amanda. Really great overview. Lovely to hear from you. And last but by no means least at all, Richard, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Richard Pedley. So I work for National Highways, as was Highways England. Our role really is keeping the country moving. So we look after around 4,500 miles of roadway, strategic road network, as we call it. So we've got a huge role to play socially, economically across the country. That's one of the reasons I joined National Highways. So my background originally started in the military. So I was in the army for 10 years or so. My expertise was around GIS systems and terrain analysis. So I was deployed to the first Gulf conflict. I spent a lot of time in Bosnia and Africa, Cyprus, America, etc. And if I wasn't on active duty, then I'd just be playing sport around the world. So there was always a positive and a negative side to the career being in the armed forces. Relatively technical from a network engineering perspective, so that's what I self-taught though. I didn't go in any formal courses. I sort of left in the middle of nowhere, having to make things work myself. I taught myself Unix and scripting and things like that. So there was many hours and I actually taught myself how to juggle as well. So I'm always useful at a party if anybody gets some oranges or eggs out. So my role currently, I look after all digital projects and programs. So I provide effectively all the resources to deploy digital solutions across National Highways, and that includes things like gantry signs and things you see on the motorway. Before I joined National Highways, I just, a bit like everybody else, I just want to get from A to B. I'm not interested in what's on the side of the road. Now I bore people rigid by talking about grey boxes, and I know the signs, how they're created, and I also know there are loops in the road that monitor our speed and our activity and things like that. So yeah, don't ever get in a car with me and go on a motorway journey. I will bore you rigid with those things, but it's a fascinating subject. We obviously also deliver a lot of, I guess, typical corporate services, ERP, etc. I took interested in what the guys were previously saying before about how they got there. Mine was never ducking a challenge, really, and I still do that today. If there's somebody not taking ownership of something, I'll probably step in, and that can be good. It can be bad as well, because I'll probably take on them too much. But what I would always say to people, never duck it. If you're the person that takes the accountability and responsibility for things, 9 times out of 10, people will let you do it, and you'll learn something from it. So don't ever duck a challenge. It's probably the worst thing, isn't it? The tumbleweed, when you say, well, who's going to pick this up? And nobody puts their hand up. Well, I'm probably in there putting my hand up, even if I don't really know what I'm doing. I also think there's that little bit of thing. I always think, I was talking to a few other people out for dinner the other night about, am I ever going to get found out? And it's not necessarily, I don't believe the things I can do, but it's the things I just go, I'll have a go at that. And, you know, I'm not blagging it, I'm just having a really good go at it. So, yeah, there's always that fear someone's going to find you out, and actually you're not quite as good as you think you are. So I've not been found out just yet, but, you know, I've still got time in my career to be found out. Interesting thing is around being in a very male-orientated industry, the armed forces, as was that start to change. Interestingly, the first Royal Marine Commando female has made it through that course, which is fantastic news. But that's one person, that's one lady gone through that. You know, we've got to see more. And I think that's so, moving from a very male-oriented place to IT, which was less so, but still heavily male-oriented, and that is changing. I think there's I think I've seen a lot of changes. But what I've reflected on over the time, and why I'm so interested in this, is I actually think we're missing out on a huge part of the workforce, because what we tend to do is say, right, we want you to be technical and we want you to do 5 days a week, and we want you in this particular location. If you can get rid of those things, all of a sudden you start to get a much more diverse workforce. So I'm really passionate now about bringing part-time workers in, and that opens you up to so many more things. An example was I did some funding circle investments a few years ago, and one was a cupcake company. And the reason I invested in it is it gives you the profile of the person who owns the company. The person was senior manager at PwC. And the reason they set up these companies because they couldn't find a job that would allow them to do their job for 3 days a week. They just couldn't find it. And this senior manager, and we all know, you know, those people are highly experienced, got lots to offer, but they just couldn't find the job. And I found that fascinating. And that's why now, you know, I'll always talk about part-time working. I'm never location dependent on when I recruit. And also, you know, diversity of skill sets as well. So, and I'll say this, and this might sound really odd, but I look for personality in CVs. I don't look for the qualifications, because I can teach that sort of stuff. Can you put a personality in a CV? And I think we become a group of people who decide not to put personality in our CVs. You know, what are the quirks? What are the strange things we do? So I look at CVs completely different now. I was definitely one of those people who recruited probably people like me. And actually, that's very one-dimensional, and that had to change. I still have some of that bias towards that. There's no doubt about it. Sometimes when I'm looking for, you know, someone who's going to put the hand up each time, but I have had to change my thinking quite drastically. And actually, I can see some of the guys who work with me at National Highways on this, and hopefully they're start to see some of those changes that we're trying to bring in as well. Yeah, so that's me, a bit of a waffling. I think I waffled on a lot longer than the other guys, and they probably have more interesting stories than me, but there you go.
No, not at all. Thanks for that, Richard. That was a really nice overview. And I definitely have made a note of the juggling. So when we do one in person, I will definitely be calling on you. So you're going to regret saying that. And I mentioned earlier, the format is we've got sort of Q&A, keep it flowing. Anyone, again, who's in the sort of wider audience wants to put any points in, please just pop it in the chat box. But I think from the intros that we've had, the first question I really wanted to ask you all is the question around how do you grow your own versus how do you hire better? So I know you mentioned, Richard, a minute ago about offering, you know, part-time hours to get a diverse workforce, part-time hours, all of that kind of thing is what you do for that. But then you also said that you're self-taught. I know Rehana and Amanda have a very similar background in terms of being somewhere for a really long time and growing. But I'm just, really keen to see what your organisations are doing around internally hiring and externally hiring. Quite keen to hear from Rehana first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think we've actually cracked having a good balance of both, because you do need both. You need to grow your in-house talent. You also need fresh blood coming from outside, because you need more ideas. You need to keep that momentum going. I think in Brent, we made a conscious decision that when we were going to deliver on our digital strategy, we said that we're going to invest in our own people. So when we made a decision to say we're going to automate some of our processes with the help of robotics, we didn't bring in external consultants to do the job. We did a good amount of market research. We used the apprenticeship levy. We gave opportunities to people within the workforce to say, we're going to try this for a year. We're going to train you to be an RPA developer. Would you be interested? And I think I go back to Richard's point. I looked for the people with the right attitude. I didn't want them to be coders. I didn't want them to come in with the knowledge. I didn't ask for any experience. I said, do you get customers? Do you understand what their problems are? That's all you need. Genuinely, that's all you need. So that's what we focused on. We've built a data lake, and I'm starting a data academy through the apprenticeship levy on the 1st of April. Almost 20 of our workforce will go through the apprenticeship levy and the training, and then they'll be working on the data lake and creating all of these dashboards. Because how do you get the buy-in of the workforce if you're going to bring all of this really sexy and fancy technology and all of that stuff, and you're leaving your people behind? By upskilling our people, there's better buy-in. They want to get involved in technology. They want to know what we're going to bring next. They want to know how it's going to give them better job opportunities. So you're getting that buy-in quite easily. But also you need the experts. So as part of IG, it's my job to deliver the cybersecurity strategy for Brent. I have to make sure that everything is safe and secure. So I also know that I need a cybersecurity expert working with me and giving me the right advice. So how do I attract that person? So I do need to bring in some skills from outside. And I think, again, simple things like Richard said, I needed a scrum master. Historically, you will never find a scrum master role in public sector, not in local government at least. But I needed one because we were doing so much of development work. The best thing about the pandemic that I could go beyond job descriptions and I could go outside of London when we were looking for people, because we're not location based anymore. They can work from home. The timing is flexible. So it attracted more people. In fact, my Scrum Master right now, he's actually based in Cornwall. But again, it was easy to find him. There were more people who were interested. I actually got good quality people coming forward, and through the interview, it made it harder for me to recruit those people. And we've made some really good decisions. I think, again, Brent has been very forward thinking in the sense that the kind of networks that we have built internally, we've got gender equality, we've got disability forums, we've got a BAME network going, we've got diversity champions, we've got well-being champions, we've got so many things that we're able to connect with people to see what might attract the right group of people, what makes the difference. It's about opportunities. That's what people want. Can I learn something else? Can my job be exciting? Can we be more creative in creating roles? That's what people want. And we've used all of these networks to learn and update our job descriptions. And my God, our job descriptions were so old. It's like your person specification is 3 pages long and it asks really dumb questions. It's not solution focused. It doesn't say, how do you connect with people? Very simple thing. What do you do if this is a problem? It's not based on that. And that's changing in local government. Our questions are not our typical, do you know how to complete an equalities impact assessment? That's not important. What you really need to understand is, how are you going to make sure you are developing a product that caters to a diverse range of residents? It kind of takes you to the same outcome, but it's a slightly different take. All of those things have helped us build that skill set internally and get the right people from externally. You have to get the balance right.
Thank you so much for that, Rehana. That was really interesting. I think Mel's got her hand up for questions in the chat box.
Yeah, I thought that would be like a good way to man the chat box. So far everyone's really enjoying what you guys are saying, so thanks for that. There was a question from Claire, which Rehana you talked on, around when you grow your own talents, and has remote working has remote working had an impact on growing your own talent and securing talent? But you kind of touched upon it there, Rehana, about the fact that you can hire people from all over. But I suppose if you want people to be involved in your culture or invested in your culture and different types of opportunities, perhaps touching on remote working from Amanda or Richard, your perspective would be interesting to hear, a different kind of dynamic.
Yeah.
Go on,
sorry,
Richard.
who do you want to respond to that?
Should I go? Because I do have an answer
Yeah,
to
go.
that. I think we did have the problem when we were completely home working and completely isolated. So, one of the things I've done consistently in the last 3 years is I tend to celebrate technology in Brent for 2 to 3 days. And what we actually do here is we get the workforce to come and play around with technology. So data lake sounds scary. What is it? Don't worry about that. I'm going to put a sensor in your wrist and it's going to give you data on how quickly you play ping pong or whatever. And then what do you do with that data? This is how it tells you how you can improve. And then suddenly you're talking about data quality to the workforce, but in a really fun way. So last year during the pandemic, we actually used a virtual platform to do a 3-day event. It was Brent Tech Week, and literally people would come and they would be like, "What is a chatbot?" I said, "Do you want to be part of a competition?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, what do I get?" £50 voucher, best thing, free food, vouchers for the London designer outlet. Trust me, everybody participates. Um, and then we said, we're going to give you instructions on how you can build a chatbot and you can be a chatbot developer. But the person who builds it in the shortest period of time, you get your first prize. And there are 3 prizes going. I got around 40 people participating. But the next time around, I went out looking for a chatbot developer on a secondment internally. I got 20 applications because people had tried it. So you've just got to be creative. And also, it's the learning that becomes harder when it's virtual, and that's the bit that you've got to be patient. We did do some sessions internally because our offices were open throughout the pandemic. Our residents didn't have a choice, so why should we? We're here to serve our residents. So we were open. We made sure everybody was socially distanced, and things are improving right now. But we tried to keep that momentum and all of that going as much as we could. It is about making technology more exciting and interesting and not make it scary, because it technically is not scary. That didn't rhyme very well, but it genuinely isn't very scary thing. It's just like you need to know how to apply it. You just need to know what is the best way to use it. It's an enabler, right? There's a bigger picture. You need to look at it beyond the technology. It's service delivery, isn't it? It's people at the end of the day who it goes and touches. So it's getting that kind of stuff and making sure that we get that encouragement going. But I've never struggled in getting people interested. User groups, making sure that people are involved when your product is being developed and things like that. So getting the engagement of the workforce wasn't the big thing. I think then matching the speed at which they want things done, that's the big thing. That's where I struggle.
Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that, Rehana. Amanda or Richard, did you want to add on to that point? Amanda, go for it.
Yeah, so I think going from completely remote over the pandemic and returning to work in what I would describe as more of a hybrid manner. So we've not been told to go back full time. Some people obviously, particularly depending on their circumstances, we did find over the pandemic, a lot of the younger workforce really struggled, particularly if they were in house shares. You can't imagine what that would have been like sitting in your bedroom working, sort of 7 days a week, 5 days a week in your bedroom. So from a flexibility point of view, I think that's really important, is that where we might advertise roles in particular office locations, we do also promote the flexibility angle. We've got a sort of government initiative that we need to be moving out of London, so we don't advertise posts in London anymore. But we've got offices across the country, from Bristol, Coventry, Newcastle, and everywhere in between. And also, sort of when we advertise posts, particularly from a digital perspective, we particularly mention the flexibility angle, and we actually have found that we've been able to attract a more diverse talent that way, with, for example, people joining us on a part-time basis, which Richard mentioned was really important, but also from an hours time point of view, not being really strict on the 9 to 5. So we have some people that work compressed hours, and they might just work 4 days a week, but they still work their 37 hours a week. And some people take, for example, the kids to school. So they might start work at 8 o'clock in the morning, but then they take half an hour off to drop the kids off and to pick them up later. And we're finding that approach is making a massive difference in terms of I think the way that people perceive it across the organisation, that, you know, we're not all sat in front of a computer all day, although it does feel like that sometimes, but also that there's opportunities then for people who might not have considered a career in technology or a career in digital.
Yeah, I'd probably add to that. I think that we have seen we've got quite a good grad scheme, and we've got a very good apprenticeship scheme, and there's a lot of success stories, and I think promoting the success stories has been really good for us. I think the other thing that we're doing is the return to work scheme, and that is effectively a scheme that brings in experienced people who want to try something slightly different. They're returning to work. They may not be able to work full time, or they may need to work compressed hours or work around children arrangements, and bringing them back in and to give them a bit more confidence. So people have been off work for a few years, bringing up a family, coming back in. We're creating a scheme that gives them a bit more sort of breadth in terms of what they could take on and find things that they might want to do. And because they've already got experience in so many things, that's actually almost coming with added value now to what we're doing. So we've got like any other organisation, we've got a retention issue, because what's happening is, particularly in our data area, we're getting to the point where we're expecting them to leave because they're getting qualified, they're doing some fantastic work. 2-3 years down the line, they can go and double the salary. So, you know, we're never going to compete with that. And so I think it's important to recognise that people may leave and then have a really good way of bringing extra resource in, or new resource, or temporary resource to catch that. I think the organisation, National Highways, has gone a little bit too far in terms of its contractor workforce. We've got a sizable contract. They're brilliant, really are. But we've got to now, you know, that was a load of work that we just had to get done because we'd made commitments to, you know, government. So we've got to flip that round. We're slowly but surely changing that round. We've got an initiative called our Big Rocks Initiative, and anybody who's heard of Big Rocks before will understand it, but if you haven't, look it up. And one of them is, you know, making National Highways an amazing place to work, and that's a really big focus now on what is it that makes us attractive to work here, and how can we make more of it? A bit like, you know, I think we're in different parts of the journey to Rehana and Amanda there, but that's definitely something we're turning towards now, to try and get the best out of the workforce and make this place an attractive place to be as well.
Thanks, Richard. Actually, that leads on really nicely onto another question that we had that we wanted to pose to you. Before I do, I think we've had a question pop up. Mel, do you mind reading the question?
I'll try my best not to fumble my words this time. But yeah, it's from Tom, and it says, in the civil service, the methods of attracting and assessing people are quite rigid. What do you think is the most important for us to do to focus on terms of attracting or assessing applicants when we don't have much wiggle room? This is a really good question, because we often have this kind of feedback from our side as well. You can have, you know, someone really well and you kind of sell everything that there is about them, but then when you go through this rigid process, if you don't answer it in a certain capacity, you might not necessarily pass. This obviously in kind of central government for permanent vacancies. So this is quite an interesting one. Yeah. Thanks.
So I've been through both of those. I've been through both of those experiences, and I can absolutely confirm they are very rigid. And my view is it's about coaching, because if you're not going to change that process, it's about coaching people through it. And I think that we've got to get far smarter, I think, as a sort of recruitment industry in coaching people through this, because the reality is won't know the answer to these questions until you've gone through it and you got it wrong, and somebody tells you that was the wrong answer, it's this. Well, fantastic, because it's not written down anywhere what that answer might be. So I think we've got to coach people through it. I also think that that it's the UK PLC thing that makes things attractive. So what is it? What part of the machine are you in that's creating something bigger and greater for the UK economy, for instance? And I think we've got to do a better sell. And I think from a recruitment perspective, it's not only just saying, give me the job spec, give me the reason someone would want to work with you. So I think there has to be a two-way conversation created, but I do think that coaching thing is missing. You know, even today, he said, right, yeah, how many answers would you get back and say answers to great interview questions? Well, they're probably not the questions you're going to get asked. So it's sort of an irrelevant search, isn't it? So I think there's definitely coaching, and definitely when the recruiters are engaging with the civil service or ourselves, is what is it that makes you different to others as an employer? I think it's got to be challenged.
Thanks, Richard. Amanda, I can see your hand up. Would you mind speaking?
Yeah, so we've suffered from that in the past. We're not civil servants in Homes England, we're public servants, but the way that we recruited appeared to be sort of dictated that we had to go through the civil service route. So we've been a bit disruptive, and I think that fits well with our transformation approach as well, is that don't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results type approach. I was involved. It was one of the opportunities that I took, actually. I had an opportunity to look at employee experience for about a year. I was seconded into a role, the head of employee experience, and we particularly looked at onboarding, but part of that journey obviously starts with recruitment. And what we actually found was that there are opportunities to push back against the civil service approach. So one of the issues was that we weren't able to show our employee brand as Homes England. So, you know, it's very bland when you look at the civil service job site, etc. And everyone looks the same. All of the job descriptions look the same, etc. But there is an actual career site where you can actually present your organisation with a brand. So we did a lot of digging, and we were able to put up a website as part of the civil service that showed what it was like to work at Homes England. So we were able to put stories up there from people who work here and you know, what they do, so to humanise that approach, etc. But the other thing as well was, aside from the fact that you had to fill in an application form at one point as well, we pushed back on that. So now we were able to apply, people are able to apply via CVs. But we've done an awful lot of work within our Women in Digital network around wording, so around the use of language. So taken aside sort of the employer brand and what it's like to work here at Homes England, particularly for jobs within the digital team, we've really looked at the way that we were presenting our job descriptions and our adverts, and seeing that they're language that we use, because the language of technology is very male orientated, to try and make them gender neutral. And there's tools out there that you can do that. You can run your adverts through, your job descriptions through, and it pops up with sort of gives you a score. It's almost gamification, to use language that will appeal to a wider audience. So we've done a lot of work with that, particularly through the network. And coaching some of our hiring managers through that as well, so that we're getting, I think, well, the proof is in the pudding. We're getting more women applying for the roles that we're advertising, so it obviously is working. The other thing I will say as well, and it's one of the poor things about the civil service, is the bandings in terms of salary. And we started off with really large bandings. You know, you could apply for a job and it says, I don't know, between 30 and 50k, but actually when it comes to making the offer, the hiring manager wasn't able to maybe offer at that higher banding. So we fought back around that as well, of actually advertising roles with specific salaries, because people need to know what they're applying for. You know, what are they letting themselves in for?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah,
no, I was just going to say, I think we have a couple of questions leading on from that question. If Mel wouldn't mind reading them, and then perhaps Rehana, you can pick up on what Mel says.
Yeah, I feel like I've got so many of my own personal questions, but I'll try my best to stick to the chat. But Amanda, it'd be great if you wouldn't mind putting the tool that you use in the chat box afterwards, and maybe other people can look into that around job adverts. I think that'd be really useful. But there is a question from Vanessa that says, do you think also sometimes it's the hiring manager not feeling that they can be more creative in how they hire? And what they look for? Is this a systemic barrier for... Oh, my door's knocked. Is this a systemic barrier or a barrier created by individuals themselves?
Yeah, I I think I've mentioned a little bit of that, but we all have an unconscious bias. And however, you know, it's a constant battle, personal battle to try not to do that. But it does absolutely cloud some of your thinking and how you recruit. I think it's also then getting someone from a completely different background to help you with the interviewing process or with a different view on the world. And I now try and choose people, you know, who I'm interviewing with that a completely different part of the business to me.
Yeah.
And they will come at it from a completely different view.
Yeah.
So there are ways and means that unconscious bias, though, you just got to keep challenging yourself for it, because you get a corporate unconscious bias because you see the people that succeed and you go, I want one of those. And then you've got your own unconscious bias as well, which, you know, we're brought up with. It's part of our nature and the nurture that we get as well. So yeah, it's a tricky one to say, is there a right or wrong, you know, approach to it. It's sometimes you've just got to get other people's opinion, and the more diverse you can be in the people that interview with you, the better. So
I would say it's a combination of both, Mel. I think there is a systematic thing as well. Like I know in local government, when somebody makes an application, we want them to give an example for every single person specification. And they've written a thesis of their experience, but now we've cut it down and we've said, just give us 2 sides of an A4 and tell us why you're right for the job. And I think, like Amanda said, we've reviewed all our job descriptions because they were so old and clunky and they were so rigid and specific. So it's like you're setting people up to fail. And in a way, we encouraged the bad behavior that my job description says this, so I'm only going to do this job. So, you know, that's a knock-on thing that we don't realize when we're going to be very rigid about job descriptions. In a way, you're setting people to say this is all you can do. And one of the things I've realized these days in interviews or when we're speaking to people to find out, you know, why they're interested in the role, it's the ability to bring their ideas to fruition. It's their, you know, if the opportunity to share their knowledge or their experience or their ideas and make something out of it. That's what makes a job interesting, regardless of the level or regardless of the banding, regardless of what specific, you know, what that role is. It's the ability to be able to do that. And I think that's changing in the workforce, and we've got to cater to that. That's why your job descriptions should be flexible. Brent has got a flexible working policy. So our offices are open from 6 to 10 in the night. And as long as you do your 7 hours, it really doesn't matter. You can break up your hours as well throughout the day, which really helps. Because if you're a mother and you want to make sure that you want to drop off your kids to school and then come back, is having all of that flexibility. And it really helped us with our sickness as well, because people used to go for their doctor's appointment. But now that they know our offices are open from 6 to 10 in the during the day, they can work anytime during that period. They're flexible with their appointments. They come back and they just do what needs to be done, and the productivity increases. And I think Brent, after a long time, in the last 2 years, we are actually advertising our roles through LinkedIn. And then you get a lot of people sharing it, and then you get people talking about it, and people calling up and saying, oh, we saw this role, can we talk to you about it? And that's a really good thing as well, because then we get to see who's interested in the roles as well, because we get to see their profiles. And we're like, okay, yeah, that is really interesting. Should we also reach out? So it's making all of those changes. And I would say as a council, we're becoming more relevant when it comes to recruitment and not sticking to those old days of, you know, this is how we did it. The read days, that's what I call them. You can only go to read on the high street.
No, I agree with you, Rehana. I think things are changing the way you advertise, especially for us, you know, LinkedIn. But rather than just dropping an advert once a week, you know, it has to be about the whole engagement that you've got on LinkedIn, having your name out there, sharing interesting articles, doing things like this, you know, talking on behalf of where you work. That's really how you get the engagement and people talking about Brent or highways or Homes England or wherever you might work. This is a really interesting conversation. I'm just going to check. Mel, have we missed any questions in the chat box?
Yeah. So I think there's one question that I'll go on to shortly, but I think just going back to the optics and the marketing almost of your business, that you can't necessarily get that from a job description. So it's interesting around the pay salary that you have indicated, Amanda, the multiple different panel members that you mentioned, Richard, and obviously like the flexible working that you've talked about, Rehana. And I think that when you're trying to bring more women into your business, it's all of those things that kind of create this inclusion. And actually diversity is underpinned by inclusion, isn't it, really? And that's where you want to break this kind of barrier and biases. So I just wanted to just mention that. But there's a question specifically to you, Rehana, although probably relevant to everybody, where it says, what are the challenges that you come across building an internal capability versus contractors, particularly when you're working to deliver for a program of work over a specific timeline? And Richard, you obviously alluded to that as well. So Richard, you're kind of shaking your head, even though it was directed to Rehana. So I don't know whether you want to go and answer that first.
Yeah, I think that it's a really tricky balance. So I'll give you an example where I've got two quite large programs that take up 75% of my permanent delivery capability right now. That means I've only got 25% to spread across the rest of national highways, and that's hundreds of projects. So I cannot not afford to have contractors in. I have to have them there. What that means, though, is that my structure is also then comes under pressure because I don't have necessarily the right levels of assurance work going on. So we're trying to readdress that balance now. And hopefully when those two programs are completed this year, I'll get more of the permanent people back. What is interesting, though, is that you can be if you're successful, you start to attract people from within the organisation. So I'm getting a lot of people coming into me now from operations, roadside operation type people, who are saying, we really want to work for digital services because we can see where you're going, and you're really doing a good story and narrative behind this. The whole program thing, though, is a real dilemma. How much can you deploy your permanent team if your head count is locked in? And then what's the legacy? So you don't want that program to end and no knowledge be retained within the organisation. It's such a fine balance. I'm not sure we've got it right quite yet. Well, hopefully over the next probably 2 years, with the new programs, with the grads and apprenticeships coming in as well, we'll start to address the balance. But it's tricky.
Yeah, I mean, I find the same thing, Richard. But what we tend to do is when we do bring in consultants, so let me go back. One of the things with the program is you've got a finite amount of money and a finite amount of time to deliver your program. So there's an element of speed. And there's an element of understanding how quickly you can upskill your workforce. And they have to go through a journey and a process. So they'll be at a basic level, they move to an intermediate level, they then move to an advanced level. And one of the things is, depending on the project, so the particular program or the work stream we're working on, I tend to bring in consultants, but every single consultant's role will be, you deliver what we're asking because I've got the speed, but you've got to spend some time upskilling the workforce that we've got. And if you don't do that, you create that gap. One, you become extremely reliant on the consultant, and then you don't get your people coming on the journey. And then when the consultant leaves, you have another gap. Then you're trying to fix that gap with another problem and another problem and another problem. And by now, the workforce is up in arms because they're like, we've changed, our structures need to change, but we're not ready to take those jobs because we've gone out to consultants. It doesn't bring out the best. And I always say this, consultants do come in, but half the thing what they say in a very fancy way is what the workforce really understands and tells them what the problem is. So you need that combination. So I think throughout my program, I've always maintained it. We'll bring in consultants when it is required because they're the experts and they can get the speed in which we want to deliver. But what we want in that role is not just working in isolation. You upskill our workforce. But before I bring in the consultant, I will identify the internal team that needs to be upskilled so that they're ready. We've got space. We've backfilled their operations or their BAU activities so that we can release their capacity to learn. So again, it's the same ethos as an apprenticeship levy. You need to release your people for 1 day of training. 20% of their day, their working time needs to go towards training. But we work with service managers to say we backfill for the BAU, so they spend some time with the consultant so that we can, so that they get to learn from the consultant. And I embed those consultants in those teams. So I've got an expert right now who's developing all of my form step forms because we've moved on to a new content management system for our website. But I have put that person, I didn't leave them in the transformation, although this is a transformation-led project, I've moved that person into the digital development team, because eventually that's the team who's going to carry and manage the website. So they need to know, .NET languaging or coding, whatever they need to do there. That's what they need to know. So this person works with them for that 6 months. And again, I'm not saying that's the most perfect way to do it. I think we'll all have challenges. We've just got to figure out what the best way to do is. And this is the best way it's working for me right now with Brent. I could, might face a different challenge for a different program, but right now I've mitigated it by making sure that that balance is there.
Amazing, thank you for that. We're having some really great conversation. There was a point that I really wanted to talk about and to bring up, so it might verge a little bit off of the sort of hire versus grow internally point, but I just want to see, is someone called Phil Clark still on the call? I'm calling you out, sorry Phil.
Yeah, we're still here. I just
Hi Phil, sorry.
My cat was attacking me, so I switched my camera off.
No worries at all. I just sort of hunting through. I hope you don't mind. I wanted to call on you because you sent some really interesting data through over the weekend to Mel about sort of senior female directors and sort of the tech space. Rather than me absolutely butchering it, would you mind sort of explaining that and going through that a little bit, and then it will sort of initiate, I guess, different kind of conversation from that.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so by way of introduction, so I'm a procurement consultant for the HMRC at the moment, freelance. But part of my out of hours work is processing data around the IT channel, the IT community generally. So I've spent a lot of time getting a bit of my geek on, looking at companies' house data and trying to assess what the IT industry looks like from a UK perspective. And one of the stats that I pulled was gender diversity of the statutory directors in IT companies in the UK. It's quite sobering reading. So only about 75% of directors of IT companies are, 75% of directors of IT companies are male, 25% female. And I was trying to find a little sort of chink of good news in the stats and try to cut the data in different ways. So it's quite interesting the differences between small companies and large companies. And larger companies tend to be a lot more male dominated, probably 85% overall. Small companies are more diverse. And similarly, one of the sort of interesting stats that came out was do it by company start date, incorporation date. During the sort of 1980s to 2000s, there are a lot more female directors. Well, there are more directors involved in companies started in that period than there are in any other time. And I have no idea why that is, by the way, but it's just quite interesting. But I think where I was going with it was, is there something we can do about it? Because clearly directors of statutory directors of companies tend to be either involved in startups, so therefore how do we encourage more diversity in the startup market? Or similarly, statutory directors tend to be in bigger companies, obviously in the more senior positions. It's going to take a bit of time to fix that problem. So how do we get around that? And one of my other hobbies is I'm actually the chair of a local not-for-profit that looks at the tech industry around the Solent region, and we're working with local education establishments to try and beef up their attractiveness to female students. I don't know if you guys are aware of the digital T levels and those sort of things, but a lot of my local education establishments don't get any applications from female 15, 16-year-olds to go and join the T-level digital world. So I think there's a whole range of different issues here outside of the sort of hiring profile which we focus on today. How do we get a broader range of new, fresh talent into the bottom end of the market, either to start startups or to embrace technology skills to get into jobs that you guys are all talking about? But is that right? Does that cover off what you wanted, Lauren? Yeah.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. Sorry to call you out there. And Mel's asked, do you mind if we share the infographic that you sent us?
Not at all.
Yeah, I think that was really, really eye-opening. I was just wondering, Amanda, is there anything that you wanted to add on that or to speak about?
Yeah, it's something that when we launched our Women in Digital Network, which was only launched a year ago, so we're only a year old, we've only just celebrated our birthday or anniversary. We very much identified that one of our responsibilities was around social responsibility. It's not something that we've particularly put any action around at the moment, and the reason for that has probably been the pandemic. But one of the things that we really want to do is to go out and to build those relationships with schools, and to be able to go and show the women that we have within within our network, but also within the organisation, to actually go and show that there are people like them that are working in this industry, and that actually those myths around the fact that you've got to be a bit of a techie to work in technology and or within digital, etc., that's not true, that there's a whole range of professions, particularly now as we're transforming organisations, and the organisations themselves are becoming digital organisations. One of the things that we're just tentatively sort of getting our little sort of tentacles out there is around partnerships. So we've been talking to HMRC, for example. We've been talking to the department around them setting up a Women in Technology or Women in Digital network. And actually, what we've realised is we can't do it on our own. So if we're doing it all separately, I think there's a lot more power in terms of coming together and addressing the issues. And part of that is Homes England joined the Tech Talent Charter just over a year ago, before we launched our network. And that is very much an organisation that brings people in the industry together. It's a not-for-profit. It is an industry collective to make change happen. It used to only concentrate on bringing women into tech, but now they're much more broader, and it's about diversity in technology. It's free to become a signatory. It helps with the employer brand when you've got their logo, etc., when you're advertising posts. But most importantly, they've got some resources that once you're signed up to become a member, they've got an open playbook. And it's all around that, improving the strategy across the talent pipeline. And they organise events. So they will actually go into schools and do panel events like this, where we're talking about how we address the issues. But most importantly there, I think the key thing is around measurements. So to be a member of the Tech Talent Charter, you agree that you're going to provide your employment on diversity data on an annual basis, so that they can measure it, so we can actually see how we're doing. And it is improving, but slowly and too slowly. And the only way we're going to change it is if we get people when they're young.
Yeah.
I've just shared the link for the Tech Talent Charter as well.
Thanks, Lauren.
That's something that I've been speaking to with our DEI committee as well about joining. I do think it's a really great tool to sort of just look at other companies' data and sort of really assess that. I'm conscious of time. I popped it in for an extra half an hour, but I know a few people have to drop off now if this is on their break or something. But are you all okay to stay and answer a few more questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
I've got a pretty much hard stop. There are a few people waiting outside the door to come and meet me, so I'm going to have to duck. I'm so sorry.
No,
the usual though. The man walks out the door and leaves it to you guys. So I'm so sorry.
We'll sort it, Richard.
No, yeah, you do a better job without me anyway. So
It's good to see you, Richard.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Richard.
I think to the last point about women startups, there's one initiative that Brent has started, which is what we're calling as Take Your Shot. This is an initiative that is co-chaired by one of the Brent residents, where we wanted to give opportunities for anybody who wants to have a startup, giving them free space and a digital package, and giving them mentors from Microsoft or other startup companies who can mentor them and give them some funding as well if their idea is really good. And we are focusing on just making sure that women startup gets priority as well for Brent residents. And I think other practical things, what Amanda said about, mentoring, coaching, giving people opportunities. One of the things we do within the Brent Women in Tech network is giving people opportunities, identifying people who can help staff women with their application, conducting mock interviews, giving them the confidence, like genuinely practical things. And sometimes it's just that pep talk when the imposter syndrome starts playing on you. I'm really not good at tech. What if they ask me how to code? And I'm like, trust me, the person asking you to code doesn't know how to code. So sometimes it is just telling them the truth, just kind of giving them that encouragement. And those are the kind of practical things you can do to kind of encourage people just coming in. And also all of that stuff that we do with our national trainee graduates, people coming in for work experience. I think that's another thing. One of the stuff that we do is I actively encourage just kids of people in my team or the teams that I know. Rehana, I've got a daughter who's thinking of this, send her. It's fine. I'll fight with HR. Just ask her to come and shadow with us for a week. Ask them to just sit down and see what they can do, and all the different exciting stuff. And I think, Amanda, you hit it where you said, people think when it's digital role that it's just so technology based, and it's like you're sitting in a dark room trying to, it's just got this kind of a atmosphere. It's not such varied roles in digital. Like you can be a project manager, or you can be a data analyst, you can be a business analyst. It's just, you can be a comms officer if you're really good at writing, and you can still participate because you can build the best thing. But then how do you communicate that to residents, isn't it? How do you make people sign on to their My Account rather than pick up the phone and speak to us? It just requires such a varied kind of skills that you need for something to work really well. And a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that. So it's
We've all
about
got a
just...
role to myth bust, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've got to bust those myths so
Yeah.
that people can see what variety
I
of careers are out here, because there's a
There-
lot.
There was a help desk interview panel, and somebody reached out to me, and she said, I'm thinking of applying, Rehana, but I've really a bad back. And I said, sorry, say that again. You have a bad back. How is it got to do with the help desk call? She's like, if you're in IT, don't you have to go like under tables and check on the wires and things like that? And it's like, it's just so many misconceptions about what is involved in IT and digital and all of that stuff. But yeah, we're doing some good stuff here too.
Sounds great, thank you. I think there's a question in the chat box.
Such a good question, really good question, because this is something that at Investigo we've kind of been trying to answer ourselves. It says, which is from Rebecca, who says, how do you find the balance of promoting women without ostracizing men?
Who would like to go first?
Because
Involve
that
them.
is such a good question.
I know.
Rehana?
You have to involve them, isn't it? You've got to engage with them. I mean, the person who actually thought of having women in tech was the managing director of shared services, Fabio. And he's a man. I think for me, it's just making sure that we don't beat them up. We include them, we engage with them, and we consult them. When you're trying to do something different, you consult them and you get their views. Again, is just, you don't look for just women mentors, you look for men too. You kind of create that environment where you can have honest conversations, you can have a bit of a banter, and you can say, it's people like you, isn't it? And they'll be like, yeah, well, you all are going to cry about this now, aren't you? So it's just having that kind of environment where you can have that level of banter, but you also can come up with some really good ideas and suggestions. If you don't engage with them and you keep them excluded, and it's like, initially when people were registering to be part of the Women in Tech network, obviously a lot of my counterparts to say, hey guys, I need you involved. I need you to come and tell what you see from your point of view. And I'm trying to get that balance right in that network. It's the same thing with diversity. There's no point just having a disability forum where there's just people with disabilities meet. You need to have a good balance. Challenges are you're sharing real life stories, aren't you? And that's the best way people learn. You can't tell someone, oh, you do need women in tech, and they'll be like, why?
Yeah, I get that. You need this sort of allyship, don't you, of
You do.
that.
Yeah.
Rebecca, did you have something that you wanted to add on that point? I think I saw your hand up.
No, sorry.
No worries. What was I going to say on that with the allyship? That's something that Mel mentioned earlier that we're really trying to do at Investigo. I mean, there's forums and sort of groups and committees that we do that are specifically for women. They address women's issues. We're doing a lot around menopause awareness, periods awareness, baby loss awareness. And those are things that we keep very close to the women just so we can speak openly. But what we're trying to do and how we're trying to build allyship for the men in our business is educate them afterwards. So maybe share some materials, upskill the managers, tell them how they can deal with certain circumstances and be a bit more sensitive with the language that they're using, how they're treating people. I think that's the real important area around, especially for us, of how we're trying to do that. Because one of the questions that we had was around sort of people talk about hiring more diverse people, but how do you actually have a culture that sustains that? because it's all good, you know, hiring 20 women, but then if they all want to leave because they don't feel like they're heard or listened to, or there's a culture there that really helps them be who they are, then that's when it's almost pointless doing all the recruiting if the culture's not quite there. But I'd be interested to see, Amanda at Homes England, what's going on there. I know that they've got quite a lot of diversity and culture changes happening.
Yeah, and I think when we launched our Women in Digital Network, we concentrated for the first year very much on recruitment. And some of that was because we were doing a lot of recruitment as an organisation, so there was an opportunity and we didn't want to miss that opportunity. But I think we're just coming to realise as we came to the end of our first year that it's not just about diversity and ticking the box and getting the numbers, but actually inclusivity is actually probably more important. Once we've attracted people into the organisation, we also want to retain them and encourage them to participate as well and feel like that they belong. One of my colleagues actually, we had a team meeting last week, and she was talking on behalf of the network, and she had a great slide, and I know it came from another quote from somebody else, but it was around diversity is mute without inclusion, and that really struck a chord from the point of view of that we've got to a stage now where we've managed to attract more women into our team, but now what do we need to be able to give them a voice? And I think some of it is around providing opportunities, you know, to share the platforms, and a lot of that involves working with our male allies. You know, so events like this actually, you know, putting people forward and not use the usual suspects as well, giving people that platform to be able to show their skills, show their knowledge, etc., and show their personalities as well. That's really important. The flexible working angle, we've talked about that a lot, and I think that's really important from an inclusivity point of view. But also mentorship, so coaching and mentorship. And we've done a lot within our network around promoting that in terms of giving people alternative ways to develop. So yes, we'll encourage people to go on training courses, etc., and, you know, to skill up or reskill, but also it's that bit around the confidence as well. And I think having mentors or even role models, and that's the difficulty when you don't have a lot of women within your business. People can't see themselves, so how do you actually fill that gap where we can actually show people this is possible? You know, you can go up your career pathway, you can choose a career or a different pathway and aspire to be somebody that they can't see at the moment, and that's the bit where we struggle, I think.
Yeah. So I'm not sure, have we lost Rehana?
I'm frozen for some reason. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but you're frozen.
God, so important to always smile on a Teams call, right? You just never know when you freeze.
Don't worry, I've been frozen on a lot worse faces. So. Did you want to add anything there, Rehana?
No, I think Amanda has covered it. I kind of totally agree. I just think it is important that you reach out and you give them an opportunity, because you need to get the different view in, just so that you get the best out of everyone. I've had some great mentors who are men in my life, you know, people who have tapped on my shoulder and have said, no, I think you can do it. And you need that encouragement regardless of gender perspective. And I think if they're not participating, you need to proactively seek. And if you're a bit like me, I threaten them. I know where you live.
Try that. That's my tip I'm taking away.
Yes, Amanda, just say that I know where you live. I think you should be part of this.
But I think that's something that's always stuck out for me, having spoken to you both quite a few times. Definitely the personality piece is letting people know that they can be themselves. And, you know, if you go into technology or IT or you're on the help desk, whatever it might be, you haven't got to be this one rigid type of person. You haven't got to go down the pub, you know, unless you want to. Yeah. It's just really having that openness for people and that you're not going to be ostracized for that. I guess I think we could talk about this all day, and I would love to, and I'm sure there's loads I have so many questions, but I'll save them. I think something that would be quite nice as we sort of veer to the end of today's session is sort of your top 3 suggestions that you would give to people who are still on the call, of how they can make a positive change for their business, for getting either more women in tech or more diversity in general in technology.
Yeah. I think my 3 things would be brave, think outside the box, give people an opportunity. It's fine if they're not at an advanced level of providing the kind of skills that you need. You can build it. If they have the right attitude, they're going to pick up everything that you're going to teach them. So be brave. I would say be creative in how you can show them what is involved in digital. Have a narrative, have a story. I love stories. Stories inspire you. They stick with you. People remember it. And there are so many around us. So be creative in how you can sell that to the people that you work with. And I think last thing is look beyond technology. It's genuinely one element of what we are here to do. And I think if you can kind of show people that it's just more than technology, what you do is genuinely makes a difference. What Amanda does makes a difference in people's life. What Richard does, maintaining highways makes a difference. Even if you make that difference in one person's life, then that's genuinely the biggest satisfaction, isn't it? So for me, it is about just look beyond technology and be able to share that, have a narrative and be creative and just be brave. It's fine. You're going to make mistakes. I was going to say screw up and realize I shouldn't swear. It's fine. You can't see me, so it's okay. It's good. Just be brave. Just go for it.
Thanks, Rehana.
From my point of view, I think when we're recruiting, we should be focusing on attitude and transferable skills rather than looking for experience and qualifications. And that in turn will lead to providing opportunities for people who might otherwise not think about technology or digital as a career. Starting a network, if you don't have one already, and making connections with other networks, as I mentioned earlier. And I think that's important for two different reasons. One is, obviously for the agenda of improving the number of the gender gap with it that exists already, but also I think we have a responsibility to provide a safe space. People, particularly in our network, we've identified as well with intersectionality. They do need a place where they can come and they can be honest and they can talk about the challenges that they're experiencing. And then lastly, what I just mentioned before, which is about sharing your platform. So particularly our male colleagues, if you're asked to speak at an event, making sure that the event has a gender diverse panel, and if not, offering to give your space up to another lady, to a woman. That will make a huge difference in terms of giving the opportunity for people to hear diverse voices.
I love that. That's why we were really keen to have Richard on the panel and sort of talk from his point of view on that and the data that Phil shared with us as well. But I think they're really, really good takeaways from everything that we've said today. And I thank you all so much for typical, I get a cough as soon as I start speaking, for taking some time out to do this and to talk to us. I'm gonna cough a little bit. Mel, would you mind?
I'll carry over. Yeah. Again, thank you guys so much. And Amanda, I wanted to say to you that where we are at Investigo is exactly what you talked about, that we realise what our playing field is right now. And actually we've kind of been awarded this 3-star recruitment business, which is great. I mean, we've got loads of awards to show for it, but now we're like, okay, well, how do we retain and develop individuals? Because we get this report done from our industry networks and the kind of experts, kind of like the tech charter, that tells us where we are in line with the market, and kind of looking at what we can do to improve those role models in our business, because we're still very male dominated. Kind of recruitment's a bit like tech like that. And there's lots of misconceptions around the type of person that needs to be in recruitment, kind of like in technology too. So I just wanted to let you guys know that we're all on the journey, and hopefully we'll have all the answers for you at some point. I did put a note in the comment section that anyone who wants a further session, obviously pending you guys are happy to do something later down the line, Q3, Q4, let us know, because this topic is so wide. We really could have taken a piece of it and digested it into so much. But yeah, thanks so much, Lauren, for organising. And I suppose if anyone has any questions, if you guys don't mind, any kind of direct messages to yourself or filter them through Lauren or I. But otherwise, thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Mel.
Thank you. Good to
Thanks
see you
everyone
all.
in the chat box as well who participated.
Everyone.
Tom, I definitely agree with your point that you just put there.
Yeah, it's true. The women are better at recruitment.
Lovely
Good to
to
see
see
you
you.
all.
Have a
Bye.
nice
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, all.
day.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
How do I stop? Okay.